Year 10, The Monkey's Paw by W. Jacobs, the questions from the exam. So we were asked to do, question 4 was, in this extract there is an attempt to build tension. Evaluate how successfully this is achieved. Support your views with detailed reference to the text. So if I just read through the extract again, and then we can have a careful think about how we might answer this question. So this is an extract from a Victorian short story called The Monkey's Paw. You'll be able to get this on Project Gutenberg for free. I wish for £200, said the old man distinctly. This old man has purchased a monkey's paw from a friend, which supposedly has the power to grant its owner 3 wishes. But in actual fact, it has the most hideous outcome. You can read the story very easily for free on Project Gutenberg. I'm just going to shut this door, because otherwise it's banging. It's a bit windy today. Okay, so I'll start reading it now. I wish for £200, said the old man distinctly. A fine crash from the piano greeted the words, interrupted by a shuddering cry from the old man. His wife and son ran toward him. It moved, he cried, with a glance of disgust at the object as it lay on the floor. As I wished, it twisted in my hands like a snake. Well, I don't see the money, said his son, as he picked it up and placed it on the table, and I bet I never shall. It must have been your fancy, father, said his wife, regarding him anxiously. He shook his mind. Never mind, though, there's no harm done, but it gave me a shock all the same. They sat down by the fire again while the 2 men finished their pipes. That's the father and son. Outside, the wind was higher than ever, and the old men started nervously at the sound of a door banging upstairs. A silence, unusual and depressing, settled upon all 3, which lasted until the old couple rose to retire for the night. I expect you'll find the cash tied up in a big bag in the middle of your bed, said Herbert, as he bade them good night, and something horrible squatting up on top of the wardrobe, watching as you pocket your ill-gotten gains. The old man sat alone in the darkness, gazing at the dying fire and seeing faces in it. The last face was so horrible and so simian, which means like a monkey, that he gazed at it in amazement. It got so vivid that, with a little uneasy laugh, he felt on the table for a glass containing a little water to throw over it. His hand grasped the monkey's paw, and with a little shiver he wiped his hand on his coat and went up to bed. So this is actually a piece about the supernatural, actually, and so this is building up the tension. So the old man decides he wants to wish for just a mere £200, which is quite a lot in those days. It was written in the 1900s, this story. So yeah. And so basically, a fine crash from the piano greeted the words, interrupted by a shuddering cry from the old man. So within the first 2 lines, you get this sort of sense of suspense, don't you? And some language which is very emotive, shuddering cry. So when we approach a piece like this, we look at the 10 points. We look at the subject matter, so we talk about basically this is a man who's made a wish, an old man who's made a wish for money, and the tension that arises after this, basically, because he seems to have made a supernatural wish, and how it affects the family and himself. The message seems to be that this is a terrible thing to do, and that actually there's all sorts of terrible suspense we're getting to feel in this particular passage. So we need to unpick how the tension's built. So we can look at the form and structure for a start. So it starts off with I wish for £200, which is a flat statement. He says it's distinctly. And by the end of the extract, he's shivering. He's not speaking distinctly. He's wiping his hand on his coat, and he's feeling uneasy by the end. So there's a development, isn't there? And basically, also structurally, you've got. He wishes, and then you've got the crash from the piano, and then they run towards him, and then he explains what's happened, and then the pathetic fallacy, the wind outside is blowing and blowing and blowing, so it's reflecting the sort of horrible situation that potentially could happen. And then a silence unusual and depressing settled upon all three. So that's important, unusual and depressing. So that language, those descriptive words, those adjectives, describing, the tone is very, very negative. Actually, it's unusual and depressing. It settled on all three, which lasted until the couple rose to retire for the night. So the language, which is so we're looking at first of all the structure. And finally, if you go on, it talks about the old man sat in alone in the darkness, and he's gazing at the dying fire, and then basically he sees these images of monkeys in the fire. So that's the structure. So it builds up this tension, basically, isn't it? The events. So that's the structure of it. If we look at the language, we've got words like disgust, shuddering, and basically as we get towards the end, he's uneasy, and he's amazed at what he's seen in the fire. So those adjectives are and the language being used is very key to creating a sense of horrible tension, and also they've got direct speech, which is also under language. So he has a joke, doesn't he? I expect you'll find the cash tied up in a big bag in the middle of your bed, and something horrible squatting up on top of the wardrobe, watching as you pocket your ill-gotten gain. So that direct speech as well. He's having a joke, but actually, the whole piece seems to be hinting at something horrible. So there's a metaphor there, something horrible squatting on top of something horrible squatting on top of the wardrobe. So that's, he's describing something there. Watching as you so I suppose you can probably say it's personifying the sort of evil, really, isn't it? That's something horrible squatting on. Anyway, there's direct speech, which is winding him up as well. Imagery is another point. We need to look at imagery. So there's the imagery is like a snake. It twisted my hands like a snake. So that's actually, obviously, there's all the connotations of the word snake. It's evil. It's the serpent. It's the temptation in the Bible. Eve eats the apple, doesn't she? Because the snake gives it to her. They're also very scary, aren't they? And also people perceive them as dangerous. And then you've got the image of the monkey in the fire. It was so horrible and so simian. Obviously, the word "so horrible", that's an adjective, and it probably links, but puts back into language. But they all overlap, of course. And then if we want to look at any literary devices, which is another point in the 10 points, literary devices, a fine crash from the piano greeted the words. The first thing that happens is onomatopoeia, basically, a fine crash. That's the first thing after he wishes. And then we have a shuddering cry. And shuddering is onomatopoeic as well, actually, isn't it, I suppose? It sounds like a shudder. So that's actually the literary devices. And then what else do we need to think of? Oh, the tone. The tone is very full of tension and suspense, basically, and negative and scary, horrible and simian, nervously, silence unusual and depressing. So the tone is very, very negative. And the word glance of disgust. So there's nothing positive actually about this, is there, at all? And then the next one is a point of view. So we get Herbert's point of view is having a bit of a joke there, but overall it's written in the third person, so we can see all of the responses that all of them had. We're not just limited to the first person, are we? So we can see it must have been your fancy father, said his wife, regarding him anxiously. So that's to regard someone anxiously. Anxiously is an adverb. So it's laden with language, actually, that actually suggesting unease and tension. Started nervously. Again, the adverbs are quite indicating that this is a very negative situation. We've got sensory language, the glance of disgust, twisted in my hand, shook his head. That highlights the shock, horror, and eventual acceptance of the fact that they've actually done this wish. Never mind, all the same. So they're pretending calm, really. But there's this kind of idea that the language and structure are being used to achieve effects and influence the readers in a very powerful way. And you can see how the language and structure throughout the whole thing brings us to this sort of, he rises to retire. It's alliteration, of course. You could talk about that. We supposedly get us all back to normal, but we don't really believe it is, have we? To get the top grade, you need to do references, point, quote, explanation of all those things I've talked about, using those 10 points basically, and you need to be persuasive, and how, you know, W.W. Aitken has managed to create this amazing piece to create this amazing tension. Read the whole book. It's really, really good, because it's a short story, actually, about 7 pages. If you actually read it, it'll give you some really good ideas on how to write your own short story, actually. And if the Project Gutenberg comes in a short story collection, so read some more, and that way you'll be real idea of how the masters write short story and manipulate language, and you'll be much, much better and more able to write about it. Just to say briefly, Outside the Wind was higher than ever, and that's actually the sound of a door banging up. Says, okay, that's pathetic fallacy. Nature seems to be uneasy by what he's done. All right, well, I hope that's helpful, and yeah, if you want to write that up for me, question 4, which I'll just read it out again. In this extract, there's an attempt to build tension, evaluate how successfully this is achieved, support your views with detailed reference to the text. In this thing, it's worth 15 marks, so basically try and do, you know, at least 10 points, really. Then you'll probably be home and dry, won't you? Okay, thank you.